The Galaxy's Edge restaurant prided itself on serving the most influential beings in the sector, its crystal walls offering panoramic views of 3 different star systems while holographic displays showcased cuisine from dozens of worlds. Empress Lyralii of the Andorian Empire adjusted her simple merchant's attire one final time before entering the establishment, her pointed ears carefully concealed beneath a neural dampener that would prevent casual identification of her royal status. "Remember, sweetheart, we're just travelers today," she whispered to her 7-year-old daughter Princess Kira, whose large violet eyes reflected the restaurant's ambient lighting with an intelligence that most people never bother to notice. "No one needs to know who we really are." Kira nodded with the careful deliberation that characterized all her movements, her neurological condition affecting motor functions in ways that made simple gestures require concentrated effort. The rare Andorian syndrome had been present since birth, creating challenges with coordination, speech, and social interaction that palace physicians had declared manageable but incurable. The hostess, a tall centaurian with 6 arms and an expression of professional politeness, glanced at Kira's slightly unsteady gait and obvious differences before directing them to a corner table that would minimize their visibility to other patrons. The placement wasn't technically discriminatory, but Lyralii recognized the subtle segregation that she'd encountered throughout the galaxy whenever she traveled with her daughter. "Will this table be satisfactory?" the hostess asked, her tone suggesting that alternative seating wasn't really an option. "Perfect," Lyralii replied, helping Kira settle into her chair while observing the restaurant's other customers. The usual collection of wealthy merchants, diplomatic officials, and corporate executives occupied the prime tables, their conversations creating a background hum of interstellar commerce and political maneuvering. Several nearby patrons glanced toward their table with expressions that ranged from curiosity to poorly concealed discomfort. Kira's condition was immediately obvious to anyone who bothered looking, her movements requiring extra time and concentration while her facial expressions sometimes lagged behind her emotional responses in ways that many found unsettling. "Mama," Kira said softly, her words requiring visible effort to articulate clearly, "the music is pretty." The restaurant's background audio system provided gentle melodies from various worlds, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated refinement that complemented the establishment's elegant decor. Lyralii noticed that Kira's body swayed slightly to the rhythm, her daughter's natural response to music being one of the few things that her condition didn't seem to affect negatively. "Yes, darling, it is pretty. Do you like this song?" Kira's enthusiastic nod came with a smile that transformed her entire face, revealing the vibrant personality that existed beneath the physical challenges that dominated most people's perceptions of her. These moments of pure joy reminded Lyralii why she continued fighting for her daughter's inclusion in activities that others considered beyond her capabilities. A human waiter approached their table with the kind of measured stride that suggested professional training combined with genuine courtesy. Unlike the other service staff, he made direct eye contact with both Lyralii and Kira, his expression showing none of the uncomfortable avoidance that typically characterized interactions with disabled individuals. "Good evening," he said with a warm smile that encompassed both mother and daughter equally. "I'm Alex, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Welcome to Galaxy's Edge." What struck Lyralii immediately was Alex's natural manner. He addressed them as a family unit rather than speaking exclusively to the adult while treating Kira as an afterthought or burden. His body language showed none of the subtle tension that most people displayed when interacting with disabled individuals. "Hello, Alex," Lyralii replied, testing his reaction to Kira's presence. "This is my daughter Kira. We're excited to try some of the famous cuisine we've heard about." "Excellent choice," Alex said, crouching slightly to bring himself to Kira's eye level. "Kira, have you been to a restaurant like this before? We have some really special dishes that I think you might enjoy." Kira's eyes widened with surprise and pleasure at being addressed directly by a stranger who spoke to her as if her opinions mattered. Most service personnel directed all communication through Lyralii, treating her daughter as if her condition affected her ability to have preferences or make decisions. "I like music," Kira managed, her words carefully formed but clearly articulated for someone willing to listen patiently. "I noticed you were moving to the rhythm," Alex observed with genuine interest. "Do you dance?" The question was asked without any apparent awareness that most people considered dancing beyond Kira's abilities. Alex's casual inquiry treated her interest in music as perfectly normal rather than surprising given her physical limitations. Sometimes, Kira replied, her confidence growing as she realized this stranger was actually listening to her responses rather than merely being polite. Lyralii watched the interaction with fascination tinged by cautious hope. In 7 years of public appearances, diplomatic events, and social gatherings, she had never witnessed anyone speak to Kira with such natural ease and genuine interest. Most people either ignored her daughter completely or interacted with exaggerated patience that highlighted her differences rather than acknowledging her capabilities. "That's wonderful," Alex continued. "Music and movement are some of life's greatest pleasures. Now, what kind of flavors do you both enjoy? We have some amazing options from several different worlds." As Alex explained the menu selections, Lyralii noticed that he included Kira in the discussion by asking specific questions about her preferences while providing information in ways that accommodated her processing needs. His approach demonstrated intuitive understanding of inclusive communication without any apparent effort or conscious strategy. "Do you have anything mild?" Lyralii asked. "Kira has some dietary restrictions that require careful preparation." "Absolutely," Alex replied. "We're experienced with accommodating various nutritional needs. Would you prefer something from Andorian cuisine, or would you like to try flavors from other worlds?" The casual mention of Andorian food made Lyralii's pulse quicken slightly. Their disguise depended on avoiding connections to their home world that might trigger recognition of her identity. However, Alex's suggestion seemed based on observing Kira's positive response to familiar options rather than any suspicion about their background. "Andorian sounds perfect," Kira said clearly, her excitement about familiar food overcoming her usual speech difficulties. "Great choice," Alex agreed enthusiastically. "I'll make sure the kitchen knows about any preparation requirements. And while you're deciding, please enjoy the atmosphere. The view is spectacular, and the music selection changes every few minutes to showcase different planetary traditions." As Alex departed to place their preliminary order, Lyralii observed the continuing subtle reactions of other patrons to Kira's presence. Conversations at nearby tables included whispered comments about appropriate public behavior and parental responsibility, creating an undertone of judgment that she'd learned to expect but never stopped finding painful. "Mama, he's nice," Kira observed, her ability to assess social situations often surprising people who assumed her condition affected her emotional intelligence. "Yes, sweetheart, he is very nice." Lyralii reflected on how remarkable it was to encounter someone who treated her daughter with the same courtesy and respect he would show any other customer. Alex's natural inclusiveness stood in stark contrast to the careful tolerance that characterized most interactions with disabled individuals in their society. The Empress found herself hoping that Alex's approach would continue throughout their meal, providing Kira with the kind of positive social experience that could boost her confidence and demonstrate that acceptance was possible outside their protected palace environment. Alex returned to their table carrying a small tablet displaying holographic images of various dishes, his approach unhurried and patient in ways that immediately put Kira at ease. While other servers in the restaurant moved with efficiency that prioritized quick table turnover, Alex seemed genuinely interested in ensuring their dining experience would be enjoyable rather than merely adequate. "I brought some pictures of our most popular Andorian dishes," he explained, positioning the tablet where both Lyralii and Kira could see the displays clearly. "Kira, which ones look interesting to you?" Most waiters would have directed this question to Lyralii, assuming that a disabled child couldn't make meaningful food choices or communicate preferences effectively. Alex's decision to treat Kira as the primary decision-maker demonstrated respect for her autonomy that few adults in her life had ever shown. Kira studied the holographic displays with careful attention, her finger moving slowly across the tablet's surface as she examined each option. Her concentration was visible in the way she leaned forward slightly, taking time to process the visual information before responding. "This one looks pretty," she said, pointing to an image of crystalline Andorian fruit arranged in artistic patterns that sparkled under the restaurant's lighting. Excellent choice, Alex replied with enthusiasm that seemed entirely genuine. That's our starfruit medley with Andorian honey crystals. It's one of my personal favorites because the flavors are gentle but complex, and the presentation is as beautiful as the taste. Lyralii noticed that Alex described the dish in terms of Kira's stated preference for pretty food while providing additional information about flavors and preparation. His response acknowledged her daughter's criteria for selection while treating those criteria as valid and worthwhile. Can you tell me about any ingredients that might cause problems? Alex asked Lyralii. We want to make sure everything is prepared safely for Kira's dietary needs. The question demonstrated professional competence combined with personal attention that went beyond standard service protocols. Most restaurants treated special dietary requirements as inconvenient complications rather than normal accommodation needs that deserved careful consideration. She has sensitivity to certain preservatives and artificial flavor enhancers, Lyralii explained. Fresh preparation is usually safest. Perfect. Our Andorian dishes use traditional preparation methods with fresh ingredients and natural seasonings. I'll make sure the kitchen knows to avoid any processed components. As they continued discussing menu options, Alex maintained steady eye contact with Kira while explaining choices in language that she could understand without being condescending. His communication style suggested experience with inclusive interaction rather than special training for handling disabled customers. Do you like spicy food, Kira? Alex asked. Kira's immediate head shake was accompanied by a slight grimace that made Alex smile with understanding. Not spicy, then. How about sweet flavors? Or do you prefer things that are more neutral? Sweet is good, Kira replied, her confidence growing as she realized her preferences were being taken seriously. But not too much sweet. Balanced sweetness, Alex clarified. I know exactly what you mean. Some dishes are so sweet they make your teeth hurt, right? Kira's delighted giggle at Alex's understanding was the first spontaneous laughter Lyralii had heard from her daughter in a public setting. The sound drew curious glances from nearby tables, though the expressions were more surprised than annoyed. For your main course, Alex continued, I'd recommend the braised Andorian root vegetables with herb-crusted protein. The flavors are mild and complex, and the preparation brings out natural sweetness without being overwhelming. The description addressed all of Kira's stated preferences while providing information about preparation methods that would accommodate her dietary restrictions. Alex's approach demonstrated careful listening combined with professional knowledge about food preparation and accommodation strategies. That sounds perfect, Lyralii agreed. And for myself, I'll try the traditional ceremony platter. Excellent choices all around. Now, Kira, do you like to drink things that sparkle, or do you prefer still beverages? The question about drinks led to another brief conversation in which Alex discovered Kira's fascination with color-changing beverages and her preference for straws that made drinking easier given her coordination challenges. Within minutes, he had assembled a customized dining experience that accommodated all of her preferences and needs while treating those accommodations as normal service rather than special favors. I'll get your drink order started right away, Alex said, preparing to leave their table. The color-changing juice will arrive first because I think you'll enjoy watching the transformation. As Alex walked toward the service station, Lyralii observed other staff members' reactions to his extended interaction with their table. Several servers glanced toward them with expressions suggesting puzzlement about why anyone would spend so much time accommodating a disabled child's preferences. He listens to me, Kira observed with wonder that broke Lyralii's heart. The fact that basic courtesy and attention felt remarkable to her daughter revealed how rarely she experienced genuine inclusion in social situations. Yes, sweetheart, he does listen to you. Most people don't listen, Kira continued with the matter-of-fact tone that children use to describe their reality. They talk to you instead of me. The accuracy of Kira's observation highlighted the systematic exclusion that disabled individuals faced in seemingly inclusive society. Even well-meaning people typically directed communication through caregivers rather than engaging directly with disabled individuals, creating patterns of social invisibility that reinforced assumptions about capability and worth. Alex returned carrying a glass filled with liquid that shifted through various shades of blue and purple, the color changes triggered by temperature variations that created an constantly evolving visual display. He presented the beverage to Kira with the same ceremony he might use for an expensive wine presentation to adult customers. "Your color-changing Andorian juice," he announced formally. "The colors will continue shifting as you drink it, so you'll get a different visual experience with every sip." Kira's amazement at the beverage was infectious, her excitement drawing smiles from nearby patrons who began observing her reaction with curiosity rather than discomfort. The shift in atmosphere suggested that Alex's positive interaction with Kira was influencing other customers' perceptions of disability and inclusion. "This is beautiful," Kira said, carefully lifting the glass with both hands to watch the color patterns swirl and change. "Just like you," Alex replied simply, the compliment delivered with such natural sincerity that it felt like statement of obvious fact rather than patronizing kindness. Lyralii felt tears threatening as she watched her daughter experience the kind of social acceptance and positive attention that should be normal for all children but remained extraordinary for those with visible differences. Alex's approach demonstrated that inclusive behavior required no special training or extraordinary effort, just basic human decency and willingness to see individuals rather than diagnoses. The evening was already exceeding Lyralii's hopes for her daughter's social experience, but she sensed that Alex's natural inclusiveness might lead to even more significant moments of connection and acceptance before their meal concluded. The restaurant's background music shifted to a traditional Andorian melody with gentle rhythmic patterns that seemed to resonate through the crystalline architecture, creating harmonics that enhanced the dining atmosphere. Kira's immediate response was unmistakable, her entire body began moving subtly to the rhythm, her shoulders swaying and her head nodding in time with the music. "Kira loves this song," Lyralii explained to Alex during his next visit to check on their satisfaction with the appetizers. "Andorian folk music has special meaning in our culture." Alex paused in his service routine to observe Kira's natural musical response, his expression showing genuine interest rather than the polite acknowledgement that most people offered when parents described their disabled children's capabilities or interests. "She has excellent rhythm," Alex observed. "Look how naturally she feels the beat changes in the melody." Most people either ignored Kira's musical responses or commented with surprise that someone with her condition could appreciate complex rhythmic structures. Alex's observation treated her musical ability as normal talent worthy of recognition rather than unexpected achievement that exceeded assumptions about her capabilities. The pleasant atmosphere was disrupted by comments from a nearby table where two Centaurian businessmen were conducting negotiations while clearly annoyed by Kira's movement and occasional vocalizations in response to the music. "Some parents have no consideration for other diners," one of them said loudly enough to be overheard. "This is a respectable establishment, not a playground for children who can't control themselves. Perhaps they should consider restaurants more appropriate for their circumstances," his companion added with disdain that made their opinion of disabled individuals abundantly clear. Lyralii felt familiar anger and protective instincts rising as she recognized the kind of social pressure that had driven her to limit Kira's public appearances. The Empress in her wanted to reveal her identity and use her authority to address such discriminatory attitudes, but her disguise required accepting this treatment without recourse to royal power. Alex had been approaching their table with the main course when he overheard the businessman's comments. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to something more protective as he observed Kira's obvious enjoyment of the music being characterized as disruptive behavior. "Kira," Alex said, arriving at their table with a warm smile that completely ignored the critical comments from nearby, "I noticed how much you're enjoying the music. Do you dance?" The question was asked with such natural curiosity that it transformed Kira's musical response from something to be ashamed of into an interest worthy of exploration and encouragement. "A little," Kira replied, her confidence boosted by Alex's positive attention to her musical abilities. "At home, I dance with Mama." "That's wonderful. Dancing is one of the best ways to express how music makes you feel." Alex's validation of Kira's musical interest stood in stark contrast to the disapproval from other patrons, creating a clear demonstration of how different approaches to disability could either include or exclude individuals from social participation. "Would you like to show me some of your favorite dance movements?" Alex asked, apparently oblivious to workplace protocols about maintaining professional distance from customers. Kira's eyes widened with surprise and delight at the suggestion. In her experience, adults typically asked her to sit still and be quiet rather than encouraging self-expression through movement and music. "Here?" she asked, glancing around the restaurant with uncertainty about whether such behavior would be appropriate in this formal setting. "Why not? Music is meant to be enjoyed, and your appreciation of it is bringing joy to everyone who's paying attention." Alex's perspective reframed Kira's musical response as a positive contribution to the restaurant's atmosphere rather than a disruption that required management or control. His approach suggested that inclusive environments were created through acceptance rather than accommodation. Lyralii watched with amazement as Alex helped Kira stand beside their table, his movements careful and supportive without being patronizing or overly protective. He seemed to understand intuitively how to provide assistance that enhanced rather than limited her daughter's autonomy and self-expression. "Show me one of your favorite movements," Alex encouraged, positioning himself where he could follow Kira's lead rather than attempting to direct or correct her dancing. Kira began with simple swaying motions that matched the music's rhythm, her movements flowing naturally despite the coordination challenges that affected her daily activities. When engaged with music, her neurological condition seemed less limiting, allowing her personality and artistic expression to emerge more fully. "That's beautiful," Alex said with sincere appreciation. "The way you feel the rhythm changes is really sophisticated. Can you teach me that movement?" The request to learn from Kira reversed typical power dynamics between disabled individuals and non-disabled people, positioning her as the expert whose knowledge was valued rather than the recipient of help or tolerance from others. As Kira demonstrated her dance movements with growing confidence, other restaurant patrons began to observe with curiosity rather than disapproval. Alex's respectful treatment of her abilities seemed to influence how others perceived her musical expression and physical differences. "You're a natural teacher," Alex told Kira as he attempted to copy her movements with considerably less grace and rhythm. "I can see why you love dancing, you're really good at it." The compliment was delivered with the same sincerity that Alex had shown throughout their interaction, treating Kira's abilities as genuinely impressive rather than remarkable given her circumstances. His approach demonstrated that authentic inclusion required recognizing individual strengths rather than focusing on accommodating limitations. "Mama, he's dancing with me," Kira announced with joy that transformed her entire demeanor from cautious participation to confident self-expression. Lyralii realized she was witnessing her daughter's first experience with peer-like social interaction outside their family circle, an inclusion so natural and respectful that it felt revolutionary after years of careful tolerance and charitable accommodation from others. The Centaurian businessman's continued disapproval became increasingly irrelevant as other patrons began showing interest in the cultural exchange happening at their table, their attitudes shifting from annoyance to curiosity about Andorian musical traditions and inclusive social behavior. Alex's gentle guidance helped Kira find her balance as they moved together to the Andorian melody, his movements adapting naturally to accommodate her coordination needs while encouraging her natural rhythm and musical expression. What began as simple swaying evolved into more complex patterns as Kira's confidence grew and her body responded to the supportive partnership. "You have such natural grace," Alex told her as they moved through a sequence that showcased her abilities rather than highlighting her limitations. "Dancing is about feeling the music in your heart, and you clearly have that gift." Kira's laughter rang through the restaurant with pure joy that had been absent from most of her public appearances, her face radiating happiness that came from being genuinely appreciated for her strengths rather than tolerated despite her differences. The sound drew attention from throughout the dining room, but the reactions were increasingly positive as other patrons observed the authentically inclusive interaction. "Alex is a good dancer," Kira announced to her mother, her speech clearer and more confident when she was excited and engaged. "He listens to the music like I do." Lyralii watched in amazement as her daughter demonstrated social skills and cultural knowledge that most people never acknowledged she possessed. Kira began incorporating traditional Andorian gestures into their dance, teaching Alex movements that carried cultural significance while adapting them to accommodate both their different heights and his inexperience with her world's artistic traditions. "This movement means joy and friendship," Kira explained, showing Alex a graceful arm gesture that she performed with more coordination than she typically displayed. "And this one means, welcome to new friends." Alex learned each movement with focused attention and obvious respect for the cultural education he was receiving, treating Kira as a knowledgeable teacher whose instruction was valuable rather than a disabled child who needed encouragement to participate in activities beyond her capabilities. The restaurant manager, drawn by the unusual activity and the positive attention it was generating, approached their area with expressions that suggested uncertainty about how to address the situation. Employee protocols typically discouraged extended personal interaction with customers, but the overwhelmingly positive response from other patrons complicated any decision to intervene. "Is everything satisfactory here?" the manager asked, his tone carefully neutral while his eyes assessed the crowd that had gathered to watch the cultural demonstration. "Everything is wonderful," Lyralii replied firmly, her protective instincts prepared to defend her daughter's right to participate in inclusive social activities. "Alex has been providing exceptional service that goes far beyond our expectations. Kira is teaching me about Andorian culture through dance," Alex added, his explanation positioning the interaction as educational exchange rather than workplace protocol violation. "I'm learning about traditions that I never knew existed." The manager's expression shifted from concern to interest as he realized the interaction was generating positive attention for the restaurant rather than customer complaints about inappropriate behavior. Several nearby tables had abandoned their own conversations to observe the cultural demonstration with curiosity and appreciation. "Traditional Andorian dance is quite sophisticated," the manager observed, apparently recognizing an opportunity to enhance the restaurant's reputation for cultural sensitivity and inclusive service. Perhaps other guests would be interested in learning about these traditions. Kira's eyes widened with excitement at the suggestion that she could share her cultural knowledge with a larger audience. The possibility of being valued for her expertise rather than accommodated for her differences represented a social role that she had never been offered before. "I could teach everyone," she said eagerly, her enthusiasm overcoming any self-consciousness about being the center of attention. "Andorian dances are fun and beautiful." Alex glanced at Lyralii for permission before encouraging Kira's offer to share her cultural knowledge with interested patrons. His respectful approach to parental authority demonstrated understanding that inclusive behavior required consideration for family dynamics rather than independent decision-making about children's activities. "Would you like to show other people some of the movements you taught me?" Alex asked Kira. "Only if you want to, and only for people who are interested in learning." Several patrons approached their area with expressions of genuine curiosity about Andorian cultural traditions, their interest sparked by observing the positive interaction between Alex and Kira. The gathering crowd included families with children who seemed particularly fascinated by the idea of learning dances from another world. "This is so much better than just eating dinner," commented a young Zephyrian girl whose parents had been dining nearby. "Can you really teach us alien dances?" Kira's confidence grew as she realized that other children saw her cultural knowledge as interesting rather than strange, and her physical differences as irrelevant to her ability to share meaningful experiences with them. "Andorian dances tell stories," she explained to the gathering group, her teaching voice stronger and clearer than her usual conversational tone. "This dance tells about meeting new friends from different worlds." Alex helped facilitate the informal cultural lesson by creating space for multiple participants while ensuring that Kira remained the central teacher whose expertise was being shared. His role shifted from dance partner to supportive assistant who helped other people learn from Kira's knowledge rather than taking over the instruction. The impromptu dance lesson attracted attention from throughout the restaurant as patrons observed children and adults learning cultural traditions from a disabled Andorian child whose expertise was being valued and celebrated rather than overlooked or dismissed. "She knows so much about her culture," observed one parent whose teenage son was attempting to master the arm movements that Kira demonstrated with natural grace. It's wonderful to see young people sharing their heritage with others. Lyralii felt emotions that she struggled to contain as she watched her daughter experience the kind of social recognition and peer acceptance that had seemed impossible given prevailing attitudes about disability and social participation. The restaurant's atmosphere had been completely transformed from formal dining to cultural celebration, with Kira at the center of inclusive activity that demonstrated how much disabled individuals could contribute when given opportunities to share their knowledge and abilities with accepting communities. Alex's natural approach to inclusion had created ripple effects that extended far beyond their original table, influencing other patrons' attitudes about disability, cultural exchange, and the value of treating all individuals with respect and curiosity rather than judgment and avoidance. The informal dance lesson continued to attract participants as word spread throughout the restaurant about the cultural demonstration happening in the main dining area. Families with children approached first, drawn by their young ones' curiosity about learning movements from another world, but soon adults were joining the group as Kira's patient teaching and Alex's supportive facilitation created an atmosphere of inclusive learning and cultural exchange. In Andorian tradition, Kira explained to the growing circle of students, her voice carrying confidence that came from being recognized as an expert in something valuable, "We dance to welcome guests and celebrate friendship between different peoples." Lyralii discreetly activated her personal recording device, capturing this unprecedented moment when her daughter commanded respectful attention from a diverse group of beings who saw her as a knowledgeable teacher rather than a disabled child requiring accommodation or charity. A family of Rigelians who had been dining quietly nearby approached with their young son, whose 4 arms created interesting challenges for adapting the traditional Andorian movements. Kira studied the physiological differences thoughtfully before suggesting modifications that honored the original cultural meaning while accommodating different species' physical capabilities. "Your extra arms can make the friendship gesture even more beautiful," she told the Rigelian child, demonstrating how additional limbs could enhance rather than complicate the traditional movements. "Like this, you can welcome friends from 4 directions at once." Alex watched Kira's adaptive teaching with obvious admiration, recognizing her intuitive understanding of inclusive instruction that accommodated individual differences while maintaining cultural authenticity. Her approach to teaching demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both her own traditions and other beings' needs. "You're not just teaching dance," Alex observed quietly. "You're teaching us how different kinds of people can participate in the same beautiful traditions." The insight pleased Kira enormously, as she recognized that Alex understood the deeper significance of what she was sharing beyond simple cultural movements. Her dance instruction was demonstrating principles of inclusion and adaptation that had broader applications for interspecies cooperation and understanding. More restaurant patrons joined the expanding group as curiosity overcame initial hesitation about participating in an activity led by a disabled child. The diversity of species and ages represented in Kira's impromptu class created a powerful visual demonstration of how inclusive leadership could bring together beings who might otherwise remain isolated in their separate social groups. "I've never seen anything like this," commented an elderly Centaurian diplomat whose initial disapproval had transformed into grudging admiration. "The child has remarkable teaching abilities and cultural knowledge." "She's been teaching all her life," Lyralii replied proudly. "Most people just haven't been willing to learn from her before now." The diplomat's expression showed recognition of the profound truth in that observation, that disabled individuals often possessed knowledge and capabilities that society consistently overlooked due to prejudicial assumptions about their limitations and potential contributions. Alex began documenting the cultural exchange by asking participants to share their own traditional movements that could be incorporated into the Andorian framework, creating fusion dances that celebrated multiple heritage while maintaining the welcoming theme that Kira had introduced. "Every culture has movements that express joy and friendship," Alex suggested. "Maybe we can learn from each other to create new traditions that honor everyone's heritage." The suggestion sparked enthusiasm among the diverse participants as they began sharing movements from their own worlds, with Kira serving as the creative director who helped blend different traditions into harmonious sequences that showcased the beauty of cultural diversity. A Zephyrian family contributed graceful spinning movements that complemented Andorian arm gestures. The Rigelian family added complex rhythmic patterns that showcased their species' natural coordination. Even the initially critical Centaurian businessmen eventually participated by sharing traditional merchant celebration dances that honored successful negotiations and new partnerships. "This is creating something entirely new," observed the restaurant manager, whose initial concerns had evolved into recognition that they were witnessing an unprecedented example of spontaneous cultural integration. Multiple species collaborating to create inclusive artistic expression. Kira's role as the coordinating teacher placed her at the center of this cultural fusion, her disability becoming irrelevant as her expertise and leadership abilities guided the group toward increasingly sophisticated collaborative performances that demonstrated the potential for interspecies cooperation and mutual respect. "Mama, look," Kira called excitedly, "we're making new dances that everyone can do together." Lyraliai's emotions threatened to overwhelm her as she watched her daughter experience the kind of social leadership and peer respect that had seemed impossible given prevailing attitudes about disability and social participation. The transformation from isolated, barely tolerated presence to valued cultural educator represented everything she had hoped for but never dared expect. The dance demonstration attracted the attention of other restaurant staff, who gathered to observe the remarkable scene of inclusive cultural exchange that had emerged from Alex's simple willingness to engage respectfully with a disabled customer and her family. "I've worked in hospitality for 20 years, commented one server, "and I've never seen anything like this. That human waiter has created something magical just by treating everyone with basic respect and curiosity." The evening had evolved far beyond a simple family dinner into a profound demonstration of how inclusive attitudes could transform social environments, creating opportunities for meaningful connection and cultural exchange that benefited everyone involved rather than requiring sacrifice or special accommodation from non-disabled participants. As the impromptu cultural lesson continued, Lyralii realized she was witnessing not just her daughter's social breakthrough but a model for the kind of inclusive society she wanted to create throughout her empire, a civilization where individual differences were valued as contributions rather than obstacles to community participation and cultural development. The cultural dance demonstration had transformed the entire restaurant's atmosphere from formal dining to celebratory community gathering, with Kira at the center of inclusive activity that showcased her knowledge and leadership abilities while demonstrating how disabled individuals could contribute meaningfully to social experiences when given appropriate opportunities and respect. "This has been the most wonderful evening," announced a Betelgeuse mother whose twin daughters had learned several Andorian movements under Kira's patient instruction. "Our children will remember this cultural exchange for the rest of their lives." Similar expressions of gratitude came from throughout the gathered crowd as families recognized that their children had participated in something unprecedented, learning directly from a disabled peer whose expertise and teaching abilities challenged stereotypical assumptions about capability and social contribution. Alex continued facilitating the cultural exchange while ensuring that Kira remained the acknowledged expert whose knowledge was being shared, his supportive role demonstrating how non-disabled allies could amplify disabled voices rather than speaking for them or taking credit for their achievements. "Kira has taught us that cultural traditions can be adapted to include everyone while maintaining their essential meaning and beauty," Alex observed to the assembled group. "That's a lesson with applications far beyond dance and music." The insight resonated with adult participants who recognized the broader implications of inclusive adaptation for interspecies cooperation, workplace accommodation, and social policy development throughout galactic civilization. A distinguished elderly Vulcarian approached Lyralii during a break in the dance instruction, his expression showing the kind of thoughtful consideration that his species was known for applying to complex social phenomena. "Your daughter possesses remarkable teaching abilities and cultural knowledge," he observed. "Has she received formal education in pedagogy and interspecies communication?" "She learns through observation and natural curiosity," Lyralii replied carefully, avoiding details about Kira's palace education that might compromise their disguise. Her understanding of cultural adaptation seems to be intuitive rather than formally trained. "Extraordinary. She demonstrates sophisticated understanding of inclusive instruction methods that many professional educators struggle to master. Her approach suggests natural talent for cross-species communication and cultural bridge building." The Vulcarian's assessment validated what Lyralii had always believed about her daughter's capabilities, but hearing it from an objective observer who had witnessed Kira's teaching firsthand provided external confirmation of abilities that most people never recognized or acknowledged. Other patrons began sharing similar observations about Kira's exceptional social and cultural skills, their comments creating a chorus of recognition for talents that had been consistently overlooked by educators, medical professionals, and social service providers who focused exclusively on her limitations rather than her strengths. "She has a gift for making everyone feel included and valued," noted a Rigelian businessman whose initial skepticism had evolved into genuine admiration. That kind of inclusive leadership is rare even among experienced professionals. Her adaptations of traditional movements to accommodate different physical capabilities show remarkable creativity and cultural sensitivity, added a Centaurian artist whose four-armed species had benefited from Kira's inclusive modifications to Andorian dance forms. The accumulating praise and recognition created an atmosphere of celebration around Kira's achievements that stood in stark contrast to the typical responses she received in public settings, where her differences usually attracted negative attention or patronizing accommodation rather than genuine appreciation for her capabilities. "I think we should have cultural exchange evenings regularly," suggested the restaurant manager, recognizing both the positive customer response and the promotional potential of inclusive programming that celebrated diversity rather than merely tolerating it. "This kind of community building is exactly what interspecies dining should accomplish." The suggestion sparked enthusiastic agreement from participants who had discovered how much they could learn from each other when artificial barriers were removed and individual expertise was valued regardless of its source. Alex turned to Kira with a proposal that would extend her influence beyond this single evening. "Would you be interested in helping to plan regular cultural exchange events? Your teaching skills and inclusive approach could help other people experience what we've shared tonight." Kira's excitement at the suggestion was immediately obvious, her face lighting up with the possibility of regular opportunities to share her knowledge and continue developing her teaching abilities in supportive environments. "I could teach dances from different Andorian regions," she offered eagerly. "And I could learn dances from other worlds too, so we could create even more fusion traditions." The proposal demonstrated Kira's understanding that inclusive cultural exchange required ongoing learning and adaptation rather than simply sharing existing knowledge, her approach suggesting sophisticated thinking about cultural development and community building. "That sounds perfect," Alex agreed. "We could create a program where different people teach traditions from their heritage while learning from others, building new fusion cultures that honor everyone's contributions." Lyralii listened to these plans with growing amazement at how a simple dinner had evolved into a systematic approach to inclusive cultural programming that could serve as a model for broader social change throughout galactic civilization. The evening's success had demonstrated several crucial principles: that disabled individuals possessed valuable knowledge and capabilities when given appropriate opportunities, that inclusive behavior benefited entire communities rather than requiring sacrifice from non-disabled participants, and that cultural exchange could break down barriers between different species while celebrating rather than minimizing individual differences. "This has been transformative for everyone involved," observed the Vulcarian educator, whose species' analytical nature provided credible assessment of the evening's significance. "Your daughter has demonstrated leadership capabilities that could influence social policy development on a much larger scale." As the formal dance lesson concluded and participants began returning to their tables, many stopped to thank Kira personally for sharing her knowledge and creating such a positive experience for their families. "You made tonight special for all of us," said the Betelgeuse mother, whose daughters had been among Kira's most enthusiastic students. "Our children learned that differences make communities stronger rather than weaker." The appreciation and recognition that Kira received validated everything Lyralii believed about her daughter's potential contributions to society, while demonstrating how much could be accomplished when individuals were valued for their capabilities rather than limited by assumptions about their disabilities. The decision to reveal her true identity came as the evening's cultural celebration wound down and Lyralii realized that Alex's natural inclusiveness represented exactly the kind of leadership her empire needed to address systematic discrimination against disabled citizens. The transformation she had witnessed in her daughter and the positive response from diverse participants suggested that inclusive social change was not only possible but immediately achievable with proper guidance and institutional support. Alex, she said quietly as he helped clean up after the impromptu dance lesson, I need to share something important with you about who we really are. Alex paused in his cleanup activities, his expression showing curiosity mixed with the kind of respectful attention he had demonstrated throughout their interaction. His approach suggested that he would receive whatever information she chose to share with the same courtesy and genuine interest he had shown all evening. I am Empress Lyralii of the Andorian Empire, she said simply, removing the neural dampener that had concealed her distinctive pointed ears and royal bearing. Kira is Princess Kira, my daughter and heir to the imperial throne. Alex's immediate reaction was surprise followed by understanding that connected numerous details about their evening together, the quality of their clothing, Kira's sophisticated cultural knowledge, and Lyralii's obvious education and refined manner of speaking. Your Majesty, Alex said, inclining his head respectfully while maintaining the same genuine demeanor that had characterized their entire interaction. I'm honored to have met both you and Princess Kira. What impressed Lyralii most was that Alex's manner toward them didn't change dramatically upon learning their royal status. His respect for Kira remained grounded in appreciation for her teaching abilities and cultural knowledge rather than deference to her imperial rank. Tonight has been extraordinary for Kira, Lyralii continued. In 7 years of public appearances, she has never experienced the kind of inclusive acceptance and genuine respect that you showed her naturally. Princess Kira is remarkable, Alex replied. Her teaching abilities and cultural expertise are impressive regardless of her royal status. Tonight demonstrated how much society misses when we fail to recognize individual capabilities. The conversation attracted the attention of other restaurant patrons who had participated in the cultural exchange, many of whom were shocked to learn that the disabled child who had taught them Andorian dances was actually imperial royalty. Princess Kira taught us traditional dances from the imperial court, whispered the Betelgeuse mother to her companions, her voice filled with amazement at the cultural privilege they had experienced. The Empress herself was dining here, and we got to participate in authentic royal cultural traditions, added another patron, the significance of the evening taking on new dimensions as people processed the true identity of their teachers. Lyralii observed these reactions with interest, noting how knowledge of Kira's royal status enhanced rather than diminished appreciation for her teaching abilities. The revelation seemed to validate the cultural exchange rather than making people feel they had been deceived. Alex, Lyralii continued, I have a proposition that I hope you'll consider seriously. The Andorian Empire needs leaders who understand inclusive approaches to social policy and community development. What kind of proposition, Your Majesty? I want to offer you a position as Director of Imperial Inclusion Initiatives, with authority to develop empire-wide programs that ensure all citizens receive the kind of respectful treatment you showed Kira naturally. The offer represented unprecedented opportunity for a human to influence policy development at the highest levels of Andorian government, with resources sufficient to implement systematic social change throughout one of the galaxy's most influential civilizations. Alex considered the proposal carefully, his expression showing recognition of both the honor and the responsibility that such a position would entail. What would this work involve specifically? Developing training programs that teach the inclusive approaches you demonstrated tonight to government officials, educators, service providers, and community leaders throughout the empire. Your natural understanding of how to value individual capabilities could transform how we treat disabled citizens and other marginalized populations. The scope of potential impact was enormous. The Andorian Empire included hundreds of worlds with billions of citizens whose quality of life could be improved through systematic implementation of inclusive policies and respectful social practices. Princess Kira would be involved in this work, Lyralii added. Her teaching abilities and cultural knowledge make her an ideal advocate for disability rights and inclusive education. Together, you could create programs that demonstrate how much disabled individuals contribute when given appropriate opportunities. Kira's excitement at the prospect of continuing her teaching work on a galactic scale was immediately obvious, her understanding of the proposal's implications showing sophisticated thinking about social change and advocacy work. I could teach people from different worlds about inclusion and cultural exchange, Kira said eagerly. Tonight showed that everyone can learn when teachers are patient and respectful. Alex's expression showed growing enthusiasm for the opportunity to address systematic social problems using approaches that had proven effective during their evening together. Your Majesty, I accept your offer. This work could benefit not just the Andorian Empire but serve as a model for inclusive policies throughout galactic civilization. The acceptance created excitement among restaurant patrons who realized they had witnessed the beginning of potentially historic social reforms that could influence interspecies relations and disability rights throughout the known galaxy. You're going to help make the galaxy more inclusive for everyone, observed the Vulcarian educator, whose analytical assessment carried particular weight given his species' reputation for logical evaluation. Tonight's demonstration suggests that such changes are both necessary and achievable. Restaurant staff gathered to congratulate Alex on his appointment and express amazement at the evening's developments, many commenting that they had never imagined that simple acts of inclusiveness could lead to opportunities for galactic social reform. This shows how much impact individual choices can have, noted the restaurant manager. Alex's decision to treat everyone with respect and curiosity has created ripple effects that will influence millions of lives. As news of the imperial appointment spread through the restaurant, Lyralii reflected on how a routine dinner had evolved into a recruitment opportunity for exactly the kind of leadership her empire needed to address long-standing problems with discrimination and social exclusion. The evening had demonstrated that inclusive social change didn't require revolutionary upheaval but rather systematic implementation of respectful attitudes and practices that valued individual capabilities regardless of their source or presentation. 3 years after that transformative evening at Galaxy's Edge restaurant, the Andorian Empire had become known throughout the galaxy as the premier example of inclusive governance and barrier-free social policy. Alex's appointment as Director of Imperial Inclusion Initiatives had resulted in comprehensive reforms that touched every aspect of imperial society, from education and employment to public accommodation and cultural celebration. The training academies that Alex established throughout Andorian space used the same natural approaches to inclusion that he had demonstrated with Princess Kira, teaching government officials, educators, and service providers to recognize and value individual capabilities rather than focusing exclusively on limitations or differences. The key insight from that first evening, Alex explained during a galactic conference on disability rights, was that inclusion isn't about special accommodation. It's about basic respect and genuine curiosity about what each individual can contribute. Princess Kira, now 10 years old and serving as the Empire's youngest official advocate for accessibility and cultural exchange, had grown into a confident public speaker whose teaching abilities influenced policy development throughout the known galaxy. Her presentations at interplanetary conferences demonstrated how disabled individuals could serve as leaders rather than merely beneficiaries of social programs. When people treat you as capable and interesting, Kira told an audience of disability rights advocates from dozens of worlds, you discover abilities you never knew you had. But when they see only your differences, both of you miss opportunities for learning and friendship. The Empire's restaurant chains had implemented inclusion protocols based on Alex's original approach to customer service, ensuring that all patrons received respectful treatment regardless of their abilities, species, or social status. The Galaxy's Edge restaurant where their story began had become a training center where service workers learned inclusive communication techniques. Every customer interaction is an opportunity to demonstrate that differences enhance rather than threaten community experiences, explained the restaurant's current manager during orientation sessions for new staff. Alex and Princess Kira showed us how much we can accomplish when we value everyone's contributions. Imperial schools throughout Andorian space had adopted educational methods that accommodated diverse learning styles while maintaining high academic standards, proving that inclusive education benefited all students rather than requiring lowered expectations or reduced rigor. Students learn better when teaching methods accommodate different ways of processing information, reported Dr. Senna, the Empire's Director of Educational Innovation. Princess Kira's adaptive teaching techniques have improved learning outcomes for both disabled and non-disabled students. The employment programs that Alex developed created opportunities for disabled citizens to contribute their capabilities in meaningful work rather than being relegated to segregated programs or charity-based activities. Imperial agencies actively recruited disabled employees whose perspectives enhanced problem-solving and innovation. Diverse teams consistently outperform homogeneous groups, noted Imperial Administrator Thane during a workforce development conference. Disabled employees bring analytical approaches and creative solutions that improve outcomes for everyone. Princess Kira's cultural exchange programs had expanded beyond dance and music to include art, literature, technology, and scientific collaboration between different species and ability groups. Her annual festivals celebrated diversity while creating new fusion traditions that honored multiple heritages. Culture isn't static, Kira explained during the planning session for the 5th annual Interspecies Inclusion Festival. When different people share their traditions, we create new beauty that belongs to everyone. The Empire's architecture and technology had been transformed through universal design principles that created environments accessible to all species and ability levels without requiring special accommodations or separate facilities. Public spaces welcomed everyone through thoughtful planning rather than afterthought modifications. When we design for inclusion from the beginning, Alex noted during a planetary development conference, we create communities that work better for everyone rather than adding expensive modifications later. Other galactic governments had begun implementing similar policies after observing the Andorian Empire's success in reducing social tensions while improving economic productivity and community cohesion. The inclusive approaches pioneered by Alex and Kira were spreading throughout civilized space. The Andorian model demonstrates that inclusive societies are more stable, more innovative, and more prosperous than those that exclude significant portions of their populations, reported the Galactic Council's Committee on Social Development. The research institutes that Princess Kira helped establish have produced groundbreaking studies on disability, inclusion, and social policy that influenced academic understanding throughout the galaxy. Her collaborative approach to research ensured that disabled individuals participated as investigators rather than merely subjects of study. Research about disabled people should include disabled researchers, Kira insisted during the opening ceremony of the Imperial Institute for Inclusive Innovation. We understand our own experiences better than outside observers, and our insights improve the quality of research findings. Alex's memoir about the transformation of imperial social policy had become required reading in diplomatic and social work programs throughout galactic civilization, providing practical guidance for implementing inclusive reforms in diverse cultural contexts. Individual acts of respect and curiosity can catalyze systematic social change, Alex wrote in the book's conclusion. The evening I met Princess Kira taught me that inclusion isn't about helping people overcome their differences, it's about recognizing that differences contribute to community strength. Years later, as Alex and Princess Kira continued their partnership in developing innovative approaches to social inclusion, they reflected on how a simple restaurant encounter had evolved into galactic transformation that improved life for billions of disabled individuals throughout civilized space. That first dance was just the beginning, Kira observed during a private conversation with Alex as they planned their next initiative. Now people throughout the galaxy are learning that everyone can contribute something valuable when communities make space for different kinds of participation. The Andorian Empire's transformation from a society that barely tolerated disabled individuals to one that actively valued their contributions had demonstrated that inclusive social change was achievable through systematic implementation of respectful attitudes and practices that recognized individual capabilities regardless of their presentation. The most important lesson, Alex reflected as he watched Princess Kira facilitate a training session for new inclusion advocates, is that creating inclusive communities benefits everyone involved rather than requiring sacrifice from non-disabled people. When we value everyone's contributions, we all become more capable and more connected. The legacy of that transformative evening continued expanding as new generations learned that differences were sources of strength rather than obstacles to overcome, creating galactic civilization where everyone could contribute their unique capabilities to building better communities for all.